the Bible. Let us continue with Gideon's story. Gideon defeats the Midianites. Judges chapter 7. The Midianites and their allies had gathered an army of 135,000 to rob the Israelites of their crops and food. God had promised Gideon he would give him victory over them. By now, Israelites from the other tribes had gathered at Herod, and near them was encamped also the Midianite army. The enemy were camped in the valley of Jezreel near the hill of Moreh. Gideon had 32,000 warriors from the nearby tribes of Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun and Naphtali, who had gathered near the spring of Herod. But then something really surprising happened. God told Gideon there were too many Israelite soldiers. If they defeated the Midianites, they would think it was by their own strength they had done it, and they would forget all about God again. So Gideon had to tell them that everyone who was the slightest bit nervous must go back home. Of the original 32,000, only 10,000 stayed for the fight. But God said there were still too many of them. Gideon must bring them down to the river bank, and God would tell Gideon what to do. There, God told Gideon he should tell the soldiers to drink water from the stream. Almost every one of them knelt down to drink. Only 300 scooped up water with their hands. Those were the men God chose because they kept themselves ready to fight even while they were drinking water. They remembered even as they drank that the Midianites were nearby. All the rest of the men were sent back to their tents while Gideon prepared the 300 for the battle. That night, God told Gideon to call his servant Purah and to creep down into the Midianite camp to spy out the land and listen to what the enemy had to say. It happened just as God had said. Gideon heard one of the enemy's soldiers telling his friend of a dream he had had. He had seen a little cake of barley coming tumbling down the mountainside right against the side of a tent, and it knocked the tent over. His friend said, "That cake of barley is Gideon, that man of Israel, because God has given us all the army of Midian into his hands." When Gideon heard this, he was very pleased. God had made the Midianites afraid, and the victory would be much easier for the Israelites. He slipped back to the 300 and made them ready for battle. They were divided into 3 companies, and every man was given a trumpet and an empty jar and a lamp to put in the jar. Then the lamps were lit inside the jar so that their light could not be seen. When the soldiers crept down till they were close to the Midianite camp, each of the 3 companies moved around to a different side of the camp. Then suddenly, at a signal from Gideon, they all blew their trumpets and smashed the jars and rushed into the camp with their lights showing and shouting, "The sword of the Lord and of Gideon." Each man stood still and watched as the Lord caused the Midianites to rush around in a panic. They began fighting among each other with their swords. The Midianites were so terrified they did not even fight but fled eastward as fast as they could to try to cross the Jordan into safety. But Gideon sent messengers to the tribes of Ephraim, and they attacked the Midianites as they fled. Two of the Midianite princes, Oreb and Zeb, were killed in the flight, and most of their people were killed by the Israelites as well. That was the end of the power of Midian.